They said no man could move the pillars of the world. They believed empires were born of divine right and shielded by fate. They never considered that fate itself could be shattered, rebuilt, and commanded by a will forged in exile. I did not march to their gates with fanfare. I did not ride a white steed beneath banners of prophecy. I came as a storm comes, not to be seen, but to be felt. The first tremor was not an army. It was a silence that spread across the land like a rumor. People could not name it, yet they sensed it. The old order had begun to exhale its last breath. In every city, the walls whispered of a presence that was not beholden to their kings. Counselors clutched their scrolls tighter, reading laws they once trusted and finding them suddenly hollow. The empires had spent centuries perfecting their illusions, systems that depended not on justice but compliance. And compliance is the currency of fear. When fear changes allegiance, so does power. I did not need to raise a sword to begin their undoing. I raised a standard of consequence, and the world began to fracture. Merchants refused to fund corrupt courts. Soldiers once sworn by oath to dying kings walked away in the night and took their loyalty with them. Cities that had once worshipped gold began to worship truth, not because they were noble, but because they saw the price of ignoring it. The first empire to fall was the empire of noise. It was not a nation, it was a belief. The belief that control could be maintained through distraction. Their rulers threw festivals to pacify the starving, parades to veil the screams, fireworks to cover the sound of chains. When my influence reached their borders, the festivals fell silent, not by decree, but by awakening. The people no longer danced when their masters played the drum. They heard the hollowness of the rhythm. They saw the emptiness in the eyes of those who promised salvation without sacrifice. The empire crumbled not with a revolution of swords, but with a revolution of thought. And thought, once awakened, is irreversibly dangerous. The second empire to fall was the empire of comfort. Its rulers were clever. They did not use whips or cages. They used velvet chains, soft promises, easy pleasures, dreams sold in weekly payments. Their people were not conquered. They were sedated. They were not subjects. They were customers. But when my shadow passed over their land, the seductive comforts tasted like ash. The people began to remember hunger. Not hunger for food, but hunger for truth, purpose, greatness. The rulers tried to tighten their grip, only to discover they were holding mist. You cannot command a people who have rediscovered their will. The collapse was not violent. It was quiet. Businesses shuttered. Luxury halls emptied. Scholars left their posts of vanity and began to teach truth in the streets. The empire died not in fire, but in irrelevance. The third empire did not fall easily. It was built on iron and tradition. Its kings traced their lineage to gods. Its laws were etched in stone, and its soldiers raised from birth to believe that obedience was life. They had survived wars, plagues, and prophets. They believed themselves eternal, but they had not accounted for inevitability. When I arrived at their borders, I came not with an army, but with a question that infected their people like fire through dry fields. If obedience is strength, why do the obedient never rise? The people had no answer. The kings had no defense. There is no fortress strong enough to withstand the truth when its people begin to speak it. The soldiers who once patrolled the streets began to disobey quietly, not out of rebellion, but out of clarity. They no longer saw honor in defending crowns built on bones. They did not defect loudly. They simply stopped standing in the way. And when truth walks unopposed, no army can halt its steps. The kings called me a destroyer, a shadow, a heretic. They were half right. I was not a destroyer of worlds. I was a destroyer of illusions. I did not unmake their empires. I merely removed the lies that kept them standing. One by one, I watched the great pillars of civilization fall, not with flame, but with comprehension. And in the ashes of these fallen illusions, something extraordinary began to rise. Not chaos, not anarchy, alignment, the remnants of shattered empires. Those who had seen their false gods fall came willingly to my halls. They did not kneel, they did not beg. They stood, unbound, awaiting my judgment. They did not want mercy, they wanted meaning. I looked into their eyes and saw the same thing reflected back. A hunger for an order where consequence is not negotiable, where justice is not sold, where strength is not inherited but earned. They asked what I intended to build. I told them the truth. We will not build a kingdom. We will build a standard. Kingdoms require subjects. Standards require adherence. A kingdom can be destroyed by war. A standard, once rooted in truth, becomes a force of nature. It does not need to conquer. It simply is, and the world must either align with it or be crushed under the weight of its own refusal. And so began the forging of the new order, not from marble and gold, but from will and consequence. We did not raise castles. We raised halls of judgment. We did not mint coins. We minted vows. Each vow sworn was not to me, but to the standard itself. No man shall rise by birth. No woman shall fall by circumstance. Worth is the only currency. Discipline is the only throne. Word spread, not through decree, but through echo. The echo of lives transformed, of cities once ruled by greed, now governed by merit. Some feared us, others called us salvation. But names did not matter. What mattered was alignment. In time, rulers from distant lands sent emissaries, not to sue for peace, but to seek instruction. They had seen that resistance was futile, not because of my armies, but because the world itself had begun to reject falsehood the way a body rejects poison. The old world had not been conquered. It had been made obsolete, and in the quiet after conquest, I stood alone once more, not as a king, not as a tyrant, but as an inevitable truth walking in mortal flesh. For the world does not change when a man takes power. The world changes when power itself takes a new definition.